time the word Atlantis is ever recorded is by the Greek Herodotus, the father of history, in 440 BC. In his history, Clio, Herodotus uses the word Atlantis to describe a body of water, the Atlantis Sea. However, Plato was the first person to write more than just the word Atlantis. He was the first to describe a continent called Atlantis in great detail in his two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias.
They tell the story, years before Plato's time, of a conflict between the ancient people of Athens and the people of the continent of Atlantis. Egyptian scribes have recorded the story of Atlantis, a detailed description of the lost island and its people. Our first scene centers on Plato and three of his pupils in roughly 360 BC.
Today, we will continue the story of the lost land of Atlantis. The story was heard by the great Greek poet Solon from a priest on his travels to Egypt. And said the priest to Solon that there was an island situated in front of the straits, which are by you called the Pillars of Heracles. The island was larger than Libya and Asia put together.
Indeed.
Now, in this island of Atlantis, there was a great and wonderful empire which had rule over the whole island and several others. This vast power, gathered into one, endeavored to subdue at a blow our country, the Egyptians said to Solon, and yours. But afterwards, there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared in the depths of the sea. Now that is all for this day. I will leave you to discuss the lesson among yourselves. Good day, my pupils.
Atlantis sounds splendid.
And to think our Greek texts never mention this island of Atlantis.
I do not think Atlantis existed.
Aristotle! But Plato has never lied to us before.
Plato has just told us a parable about powerful and corrupt government. He who invented Atlantis let it sink again under the surface of the sea.
Could this be? Plato's dialogues were translated into English in 1871 by British professor Benjamin Jowett. Then, in 1882, a congressman from Minnesota named Ignatius Donnelly wrote and published his book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. His book influenced many of the modern theories debated today. We take you now to a tea shop in Minnesota in the 1880s, where three women discuss Congressman Donnelly's books.
Good afternoon, Vicky.
Good afternoon, Vicky.
Your tea, ladies.
Thank you, Mabel. Have you all heard about the new book called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly? No, we have not, Vicky. Do tell us. Well, Congressman Donnelly says that the legendary Atlantis was actually in the Atlantic Ocean, and that it was destroyed by the biblical flood.
But Vicky Pumpkin, I remember reading the new translations of Plato's works in Teachers' College. Plato wrote that Atlantis was destroyed in one day and one night. The biblical flood took 40 days and 40 nights.
That's true. And did you say that Congressman Donnelly's book says that Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean? The Greeks never sailed out of the Mediterranean because they didn't have the navigational tools to sail out of sight of land. But Ophelia, dear, the Egyptian was one who knew of Atlantis, and he told the Greek, Solon.
Vicky, sweetheart, the Egyptians never sailed out of the Nile and away from the Mediterranean either. Honestly, Vicky, my pet, Ophelia Sugarplum, can you imagine giant reed boats embarking into the open ocean?
Congressman Donnelly's book sounds very interesting. I'm sure it will have people debating over it for many generations to come. Good day.
Good day, Ophelia.
publication of Mr. Donnelly's book, hundreds of people worldwide began to search for Atlantis. Atlantis has been discovered all over the world, from as far as the Americas, Australia, and even Antarctica. In 2005, a group of 105 scientists, professors, and researchers met in Milos, Greece, to discuss their findings on Atlantis. Welcome. We have gathered here in Milos to discuss and debate the location and existence of Plato's lost continent of Atlantis. Professor, would you please present your findings?
The essentials of Plato's Atlantis are that a Bronze Age civilization was rapidly overwhelmed by water and fire. In the devastating eruption of the volcano of Thera in the late Bronze Age, the island we now know as Santorini was destroyed. Archaeological information suggests the island was a center of trade and religion for prosperous society.
In a meticulous investigation published in my book, Atlantis, the Decipher Myth, I maintain that a mythical civilization existed in Israel. Until about 7,600 years ago, this territory was a huge island located in the Mediterranean Sea.
The archaeological evidence, however, is negative on all accounts.
The Canary Islands have stories recounting their ancestors descending from a mighty race who inhabited an island in the Atlantic Ocean believed to be the legendary Atlantis.
This continent of Atlantis is a creation of the Athenian philosopher Plato. I consider any modern involvement on this subject as pure science fiction and totally unscientific.
Atlantis was in the Mediterranean Sea and specifically on Santorini, also known as Thera, the volcano that erupted there. Plato spoke of an island surrounded by rings of land and water. Santorini meets that description. And have you heard of the exciting, fairly recent discovery of an ancient civilization on Santorini? Houses with frescoes on the walls, bones, and pottery have all been found there.
Atlantis resides in the Atlantic Ocean. All the clues point there. In 1898, tachylite was found on the ocean floor. Tachylite can only be formed above sea level and under atmospheric pressure. This proves that mainland was once there.
Atlantis was an alien colony settled by highly evolved beings who came to Earth after their planet exploded in a collision with another planet.
Who's that?
He is not on the list presenters.
Extraterrestrials with superior brain power colonized Atlantis and then sank the island after they were done with it. Plato must have heard of it.
You weren't invited! Throughout history, Atlantis has inspired people's imaginations. People have spent thousands of dollars searching for this mythical lost land. Atlantis has turned up everywhere.
In books?
Movies?
Even Legos.
Atlantis has been debated ever since Aristotle first questioned Plato's writings.
Some theories have been more successful than others in convincing people of their similarities to Plato's description.
Everyone who has ever searched for Atlantis has failed to prove whether it exists, much less its location.
We argue that the consequences for the search for Atlantis are that we know more about our world, ancient history, its earthquakes and volcanoes, its oceans and seafloors, and other uncovered lost civilizations that we might never have known about if it weren't for Plato and his Atlantis.
Thank you!